What is your opinion on vintage analog hardware versus modern hardware? I mean, I haven't really got that much proper vintage hardware. And the reason for that is a simple one, is that for me, if I buy a brand new, I get my VAT back. So I'm already saving 20% on anything that I buy. So I kind of always look to buy brand new, and I don't buy used, which is what the vintage gear would come under. As well, I've got good suppliers up at SX Pro who really kind of look after me, really get me all the kind of equipment that I want. They've supplied everything in this room. I kind of always buy new. I never really go with the vintage stuff. Also, like for instance, here's a prime example of vintage versus modern. A Fairchild, for instance. Now, next door, we've got a Fairchild, and we've got an Unfairchild, rather. And it's a direct kind of clone as such. For the modern mastering engineer, it is the perfect Fairchild. It sounds incredible. It is one of the best compressors you will ever hear. Now, we could go and buy the vintage original one if we could find one that was working and was well looked after and well maintained. The problem is that would cost you about £40,000 plus more. Whereas the new kind of modern, kind of brought up to speed in 2023, Unfairchild. Now that one, and believe me, the sound of both of them is both the same. It's very, 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 very similar. It uses the same tubes. It's pretty much the same thing, just a modern version of it. Now, the Unfairchild has brand new tubes when you buy it. It has added features such as, I think, what is it? That it's got feedback and feed forward compression. It's also got there's a feature that's something that you used to have to get a screwdriver into. I think it's the bias or something like that. But something you had to get a screwdriver in on the Fairchild now has a control on the front, so you don't have to do that. So it's a modern version. Plus it also has an expansion rack that we've got, so we have wet dry signal, feedback feed forward. I think we have a selectable frequency of the low pass filter, or the sidechain filter. So we've got all these added features that make the Unfairchild so much better than the Fairchild. But the Fairchild still has, it's a Fairchild, it's an original Fairchild. And the Unfairchild, in my opinion, sounds better because you can achieve better sound with it, because it's got more feature, and also it's newer. It's not going to sound like it's 30 years old. So there is that, and that's one reason why I always buy new, because like I've got warranty with this. You know, I think I've got I can't think how long warranty there is, but I know that if that goes wrong, I can go straight to guys at UTA and I can get anything replaced. If I had to go and buy a new set of tubes, they're very expensive. I think they're about $1,200, $1,500 for a new set of tubes. But if I had to, I've got them. They're able to get. Whereas if I was to, it's like, I'll tell you what it's like. It's like having a vintage car. You know, try and find parts for a vintage car, whereas try and find parts for a Lamborghini or Ferrari. You just go into the dealership and go, right, the Ferrari garage, and go, yeah, I need, you know, parts for my car. This is broken. This is broken. Here we go. There we go. Whereas you go into a vintage one and they go, whoa, we're gonna have to try and track one of them down. This is going to cost you. They're the kind of reasons, and they're the honest reasons why I buy modern gear. And I personally, I think the modern stuff, it has the edge over the vintage stuff, because it's built for the modern industry, whereas the vintage stuff, it has more heritage. When look, if I had an Unfairchild and I had a Fairchild, the two achieve the same or similar, very, very close sound. But people are gonna gravitate towards the Fairchild because it's an original, and it's, you know, people are going to naturally look at the Fairchild and then look at the Unfairchild as a clone. Even though the Unfairchild's, I think it's about 14,500, they're still going to look down on that compared to a Fairchild. So there is that. There's two things there. But my main thing is I get 20% back on my VAT, which is brilliant on a new purchase. So an Unfairchild costing what, 14,000, you're getting about £3,000 back. You know, that's a no-brainer for me. And yeah, the kind of peace of mind that I have warranty when I buy it new, that's why I buy new. That's why I buy, and that's generally why I buy new everything. Also, I mean, I've got you could call it vintage. Next door, I've got a Shadow Hills optograph compressor. It's not the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. We wanted the optograph, which is the optical section of it, because we get it has a few more features that it doesn't have on the mastering compressor, which makes this a more attractive compressor. But it's an old compressor. I can't think how old. It's probably been discontinued maybe 8, 10, or probably 10 years now. It's been discontinued in favour of the mastering compressor. That's one thing that you could kind of say it's a vintage model that we've got there, because we will have that issue of, if it ever needs servicing, it could probably go back to Shadow Hills, but it may be tricky for a repair to be done based on the fact that it is discontinued now. So there's one thing you've got to bear in mind with vintage gear, is that it's discontinued. Most of it is discontinued, and getting parts for it is going to be very difficult. So yeah, that's my opinion on vintage hardware versus kind of modern analog hardware. Now bear in mind that also I'm talking from the sense of a mixing perspective, from a mastering perspective. I'm not talking about kind of vintage mics. Now that's a different ball game. Vintage mics, I would happily buy vintage mics over modern mics, because they achieve a very, very, very unique sound. Certain things like that, preamps as well, certain sounds, they're very, very unique, things like that. When it comes to mastering, I want clean, I want really kind of clean, clinical sound. So that's why I buy kind of modern analog equipment.